Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and I'm here to do a proper horror wrap-up today. This is a combination of books that I received for review as well as books that I read with my Patreon horror book club. I have some really great books to talk about as usual, so let's get started. First, I want to talk about The Girl in the Video by Michael David Wilson. This is one I received from the publisher, and this is a novella that follows a teacher who's working in Japan. One day he is having breakfast with his wife and he gets a strange video in his inbox, and it's of a girl who is wearing a Hello Kitty mask, and the video is somewhat sexually illicit and at the same time it's very strange, and he finds himself very much aroused by it, and at the same time has no idea where it came from, is kind of weirded out, and he starts to get more and more videos like this, and they become darker and more violent as they go. I don't want to say too much more just because it is a novella, it is so short. I don't like to give away the plot, but this book is described as The Ring meets Fatal Attraction, and I actually think it's a pretty good comparison. I love horror that incorporates social media and technology, and this book definitely does that. Contemporary horror is definitely one of my favorite subgenres these days, and I just like the fact that this book found a way to take really modern ideas and make them very creepy. I thought this book was just the right length. I found it very suspenseful. I was worried for the characters, and it was just unsettling. As someone who does live online quite a bit and does put themselves out there, I do find these types of stories particularly creepy. The idea of someone possibly getting into your accounts and just tracking you down online is very unnerving to me, and this book worked very well. I always like when books are set in Japan because it's a culture I'm very fascinated with. There wasn't a lot to that in this story, but this book also did feature conversations of him and his wife trying to have a child, and I just really like those topics that really help to round out the story. But if you're looking for something creepy, I would say check this one out. I was pleasantly surprised by how creepy it was, and honestly I've had a bit of a dry spell when it comes to horror this year, and this is easily one of the best books I've read so far, and I would definitely love to see more people checking it out. Next, I want to talk about Crazytimes by Scott Cole, and this is a novella that I also received from the author. This follows a man who is going about his day, heading off to work, and the people around him seem to be acting a little bit crazy, but in the usual way that people just seem to be crazy in life. However, things begin to escalate and people start to act more and more bizarre, and things just go from crazy to crazier, and the situation just becomes absolutely bananas. And again, I don't want to give away too much of the plot because it is a novella, it's quite short, but if you're looking for a banana pants crazy read, this is one to check out. I'll actually say that the writing is quite strong. I've read Scott Cole before, and I'm always very impressed with the way that he writes a very engaging narrative. And the main character was very relatable and likable, and the book starts out quite normal, which I think works really well because as the book goes into the climax, things very much escalate from there. And with a book like this, I just think it's very important to go in with the right expectations because this book is not one to take too seriously. And it's hard to describe this book without using the word crazy about 75,000 times. But if you're looking just for an entertaining, quick read, this is a fun one to check out. I enjoyed it. It made for a fun afternoon, and I would recommend it as long as that sounds like the kind of premise that you want to check out. I also want to mention The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a review copy I received from Simon & Schuster Canada. It's one I requested, and this follows a group of Native American men that when they were children, they went out hunting together. Something happened on that hunting trip, and now as adults, something is now tracking them down and possibly going after their families and friends. Now, I want to mention this book here, but I should start out by saying that I actually DNF'd this one, which is really heartbreaking because I was very much excited for it. It was one of my most anticipated releases, but it just didn't totally work for me, and I think that's more of a personal thing rather than a criticism of the book. I am a particular kind of reader, especially when it comes to horror, and I'll say that the writing in this was excellent. Stephen Graham Jones is an incredible writer with a literary flair, but what he has in literary merit, I feel like he often lacks in plot and narrative drive, and those are things that I need in my books. I really like the character work. I am someone that really enjoys characters that are of Native American or First Nation descent because I actually work with those populations in my job, and I do think the representation was fantastic, as you would expect, because it is an Own Voices story. I really thought that he represented life on reserves very accurately, but in terms of a plot, I was struggling. I got a good portion through this book and just nothing was happening. So I really can't comment on the last half of the book. I don't know if things got crazy. I really never got to the something part of what was actually happening from a horror perspective. So keep this review in mind that it's really just my initial thoughts, my impressions, but I do want to mention it here because so many of you were interested in it. So just go in with the right expectations. Know that Stephen Graham Jones really is more of a character study writer than someone who really pushes a plot along. So I was disappointed that I just couldn't get through this one. Maybe I'll try it again in the future when I'm in a different mood. Now I want to talk about a few books that I read with my horror Patreon book club. Of course, I have links down below if you're interested in joining us. The book that we read in April was The Last Days of Jack Sparks by Jason Arnopp. This is one I've been meaning to read forever. I have previously read his newer book, Ghoster, and really enjoyed it, so I wanted to go back to his debut novel, which so many people have said amazing things about. And this is a story of a journalist named Jack Sparks, who at the beginning of the story gets a chance to check out an exorcism. He doesn't really believe that what's happening is real and ends up making fun of it. And so he gets in a lot of trouble on the internet. And this book is basically a skeptic's take on the supernatural because he goes on to write a book and we get to see how his life changes through the experience of writing this book. And we know right from the get-go, it's kind of on the title of the book, that this character dies at the end of this book. And so we know that something terrible is going to happen and we are just watching this terribly unlikable person go through and explore the supernatural. And as someone who is a huge skeptic myself, I really did connect with those aspects to the story. Jack Sparks is an incredibly unlikable character, so if you need to like your characters, this one may not be for you, but I really enjoyed how terrible he was and it made for a lot of fun. The plot goes in all sorts of directions and I'm honestly not sure if it all really worked in the middle, but it came together in the end and I thought it was a lot of fun. So definitely recommend it. It starts out with an exorcism, but it goes to other places. And I have done a vlog review of this. So I'm going to link that down below and I'd love your opinion. Is it helpful for me to talk about these books in wrap-ups, or if I do an individual vlog, is that enough? You'll notice that when I do individual proper reviews, I don't include these books again in wrap-ups because I find that repetitive as a viewer, but I'm not sure about reading vlogs because not everyone watches those, and those videos are a little bit more haphazard. You kind of get my thoughts as I'm going along rather than a cohesive wrap up where I just kind of talk about the book in one foul swoop. So let me know if you want me to include books like this one in the future. Be totally honest, I really appreciate the feedback. Then in May, my book club decided to pick up Christine by Stephen King, and I was kind of hesitant when they decided to go with this one because I'll be honest, of Stephen King's work, this one was not high up on my TBR, but this is a story of a young teenage boy who's very unpopular. He is driving one day with his best friend and they come across this junky old car and he just falls in love with it. He ends up buying it off of this old guy and fixing it up, and through that experience, he begins to change. He becomes obsessed with his car and it changes his personality. And the story is told from his best friend's perspective. And I really think that the story benefited from that because we get to see the car for what it is. We get to see that it's a piece of junk, while the boy that is obsessed with it sees it as this brilliant, magnificent vehicle. And so I think that really helped to frame the story in a good light. And the beginning of the story actually worked really well for me. It was very engaging. I think it's some of Stephen King's better character work. I really do appreciate here why people say his characters are so good. And I very much like the relationships between the two boys as well as their parents and their families. And I was enjoying this one for the most part, but then I got to a point when I was kind of ready for this book to be done. I wanted to wrap up and get to the climax, but I was only about 2/3 into the book and the rest of it was a slog. So pretty much as always with Stephen King books, I'm gonna say that I enjoyed the story, but I wish it had been edited down and been a trimmed down narrative, and I would have enjoyed it a lot more. So overall, not too bad. It was definitely better than I expected, and I'm gonna continue reading through Stephen King and see which ones work for me. And finally, I just want to quickly mention that in June, we are going to be reading The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay for the book club. And this, of course, is a story of two men that take their young daughter to vacation in the woods in their cabin, and strangers come to their door and ask them to make a terrible choice. This is a reread for me, so I'm not going to be doing another review, but I want to mention here in case you're interested in joining us. I have done a review in the past, so I'm going to link that video down below, and I'm really excited to revisit this one, and hopefully other people in the book club will love it as much as I do. So that's it for this video. Are you interested in picking up any of the books I talked about here? I love your opinions as always. Also, please recommend me your favorite horror books that involve technology and social media, because that was present in both The Girl in the Video as well as The Last Days of Jack Sparks. And I really enjoy contemporary horror that includes those elements. So give me more. I want to keep reading this subgenre. So if you can help me out, that would be most appreciated. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.